Couple of days ago, Dune Part 2 has premiered in all of the major cities around the world, and Timothee Chalamet has been a subject of some very interesting conversations online. Timothee Chalamet has been accused of going through something that the internet calls twink death. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about twink death. We're going to be talking about the implications of twink death and how does this affect Timothee Chalamet's heartthrob status and his future career. And we're also going to be talking about the club Chalamet, which is kind of like a fan club that feeds into this whole narrative that we're going to be talking about. So buckle up, kiddos. But before we jump into the meat of the video, we need to ask ourselves, what is a twink? A twink is a term coined by the gay community for the members of the gay community, which you should remember that. And it usually kind of describes a man that is younger. It's a gay or bisexual man who is younger and has a very youthful, boyish appearance, is usually very slender, kind of effeminate, has little to no body hair and facial hair, and generally just who looks boyish in a way. Twink death, on the other hand, is also a term coined by the gay community for members of the gay community that originated on 4chan, allegedly, in the LGBT board during the mid-2010s. And it describes basically what happens to twinks when they start aging and outgrowing that category. And twink death usually happens when a twink is starting to gain more muscle, have a bit more masculine appearance, to lose that boyish charm, and generally when somebody kind of gains weight and becomes bulkier. Even though the term twink death has originated on 4chan, it has quickly spread to Reddit and Twitter in queer spaces. And then in 2020, when the pandemic started, unfortunately, it has spread to TikTok, where, as usual, straight people co-opted the term and started throwing the term twink and twink death to anybody who fits the description even vaguely, including Timothee Chalamet, who is presumably, allegedly, a straight man, but they have started calling him a twink, and now they're joking about his alleged and imminent twink death. Even though Timothee Chalamet is the most recent victim of this phenomenon, he is not the first one. One of the most notable examples include Leo DiCaprio, who has experienced this phenomenon approximately 20 years when he was transitioning from the Titanic heartthrob to a more serious actor, and fans have noticed that his aesthetic and appearance is rapidly changing as he is maturing and basically entering his 30s. And I fear that this is exactly what is happening with Timothee Chalamet, and that his fan base is, even though he is a fantastic actor and has so many roles under his belt at such a young age, I fear that his fans might have a problem with his changing aesthetics, just the same as Leo's audience had an issue with his changing aesthetics some 20 years ago. So is twink death just aging, but for gay people? And if so, is this kind of the male equivalent of what women have already been experiencing for basically centuries? Because the narrative surrounding this twink death is basically the fear of aging, which is prevalent in all of us humans. Nobody likes to age. Nobody likes to think about aging. Nobody likes to think of themselves as wrinkly 75-year-old people. We all want to be young and youthful and beautiful and well-liked and attractive, but the reality is we will all age in one way or the other. Some people will age gracefully, some people unfortunately won't, and there are so many factors that contribute to graceful or non-graceful aging. Even though twink death has a lot to do with the fear of aging and fear of death, which is very, very natural for all humans, it also has to do a lot with ageism and fat phobia. And I'm very glad that people are talking a little bit more about it, and I want to talk a bit more about it because even though it is just aging, ageism is generally very much a big issue in the gay community, and a lot of people in the same community just don't want to talk about it, or will pretend that ageism and fat phobia does not exist. But before that, I want to read you one tweet that kind of encapsulates the whole thing that happens in the gay community. And it's basically says twink death is a cool concept because it lets boys participate in a kind of beauty standard neurosis normally reserved for women. And I perfectly agree. You know, it's a funny tweet. I agree that you don't really see this kind of neurosis and this kind of fear of aging in the general population of men. This is mostly reserved for queer men because generally queer men have such high and unattainable beauty standards that only us women understand, because nobody else is dealing with this except queer men and general women. Straight men are exempt from that because you can have a pot belly and expect Adriana Lima, right? You can have a receding bald head and you will still think that you are the most desirable man in the world, and you will have the audacity of the most attractive person in the world. For us girls and the gays, it's not really like that because we do experience a very particular kind of neurosis when it comes to aging, and twink death is a great example of this. In women, it has also to do with the magical number of hitting 30 or entering your early 30s. And for gay men, it's usually even earlier. It's usually around 25 when you're considered too old to be attractive in the gay community. And we just generally need to fight against those stereotypes as a whole because they do exist and they are very much exemplified here in twink death phenomenon. But generally, it has a lot to do with ageism, a lot to do with fat phobia. People really, really hate to see celebrities and regular people gain weight. And a lot of these controversies started, in fact, when some people have noticed that Timothee Chalamet has gained a couple of pounds, which is not very much visible, but he does look like he has a little bit more meat on his face. He's not like gaunt and sickly looking as he usually is, even though I do think he is generally attractive and he's one of the few men that I do find attractive. I do fear for the general perception of him from his audience because I feel like he has relied a lot more on his looks than his talent because that's what's made him popular. And that's a shame because he's a fantastic actor. But I do feel that he will have to make this transition in the next couple of years because if not, he's gonna basically follow the path of many, many women and actresses who are, have started being unattractive to the general audience just because they have changed aesthetics. As I mentioned, Adriana Lima, who is a mother of I don't know how many children, beautiful children, has been scrutinized for gaining weight during her pregnancy. So it is interesting to see that men are slowly starting to suffer from the same issues that women have, especially if we are talking about straight men, which Timothy might be a straight man. He hasn't really, labeled himself, but presumably straight men are starting to suffer from the same ailments as us girls and the gays. So it is interesting to see what's going to happen with his career, but knowing what his Club Chalamet following has said, not just about his appearance, but basically everything that he does, kind of makes me wondering how much popularity is he going to attain as he transitions from a young man to a very, very serious actor and as he enters his early 30s, which is going to be basically in 2 years. But this just shows that times are changing very, very rapidly. And in these online spaces, nobody's very much immune to these comments anymore. Nobody's exempt from these comments. When I was growing up in the mid to late 2000s, these comments were only reserved for women and mostly teenage girls, but women as well. People have been commenting on everybody's appearances, and people have basically scrutinized women for everything that they do, including any weight gain, any changes that would suggest that a person's aging. But now we see this like slight shift that people are not really discriminating by genders anymore, and that men are also included in these conversations, which I find interesting, but also generally concerning for everybody, because these voices have become very, very loud. And if people are having such issues just because Timothee Chalamet might have gained like 5 pounds in his face, what does this say about the general audience and the general community on the internet? And I fear that these comments now are actually coming from straight women, because Timothee Chalamet and many, many actors do have mostly Gen Z female following. So it's interesting what that says about us as a, not just society, but as a generation. But yeah, I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit subscribe, hit like. I might post something out of the blue, and we will see each other very, very soon. Bye bye.